جلة المداد يا الله اسقينا بالمداد يا الله.
بحسن وصفات العلا أن يجعلنا وإياكم من المستمعين للقول والمتبعين أحسنه إنه ولي ذلك والقادر عليه. ثم أما بعد فالسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. With the will of Allah Jalla wa Ala subhanahu wa ta'ala, we will start with our short journey through fiqh of transactions. Before we get into or dive into the topic, I would like to mention that usually this subject is explained by ulama in fiqh. So the only thing I can say is I will pass on what I have been taught, but this is not my expertise. So I will share with you what I'm sure of, and I will look at this as being mudarasa, yani that we do something amongst us like exchanging information. I will not say anything I'm not sure of, I will just say what I'm sure of. If you have heard something else, so then this must go back to your teacher. I am sharing what I 100% know what the view of my teacher is. Is that clear? So meaning that it might be that there is a small detail that you differ upon or whatever, but I'm passing on what I have been taught. And in particular, yani from Shaykh Salah al-Hajj, Hafidahullah Azza wa Jal, with whom we have gone through the mu'amalat and other things as well. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this beneficial. There are 4 things, barakallahu feekum, in our madhab that we need to study. And even if you are not a Hanafi, then you shouldn't care being told the Hanafi fiqh. Because the fiqh of transactions has always been one of the specialities within the Hanafi fiqh. Because it is a very user-friendly fiqh. And the reason why is because the Hanafi fiqh has been ruling the Muslim countries for more than 600 to 700 years. And then they actually were the ones who melt these ahkam into al-Majalla al-Adliya, which was based on the Hanafi fiqh, usually on the Mu'tamad or al-Mufta bihi, and sometimes also on the Da'if, on the weaker opinions within the madhab. So within the fiqh, we need to study the fiqh, which is the fiqh of ibadat and mu'amalat. And mu'amalat, like Dr. Salah al-Hajj told, is one of the sciences within fiqh which is in need of experts. So we can teach it and skim the surface of things, but when it comes down to the details of this knowledge, then you need someone to dedicate day and night to it. It's not an easy thing. The same would be with al-qada and al-zawaj and al-talaq. And marrying, the fiqh of marrying and divorcing, and also of inheritance. And these things are very detailed. And today, people study everything, but at the end of the day, they take away nothing. So you need to become an expert at this to be good at it. We are going to share with you the basic things that you need to have a halal trade going on, and halal buying and selling, or even agreements on the brothers, and hiring and these kind of things, Bitcoin. We will talk about everything, but it will be skimming the surface. Is that clear? So we need fiqh, then we need the qawa'id of fiqh, the principles of fiqh, and we need also the Ras al-Mufti, which defines how a mufti and the mustafti, those who give the fatwa and those who ask the fatwa, what their conditions should be, what their characteristics should be, what they should hold on to. So all of these are different kinds of sciences within the world of fiqh. So now fiqh in very brief, when Muhammad al-Shaybani was asked why he didn't write a zuhd book, a book about zuhd, about staying away from the dunya and directing yourself to the akhirah, he actually said that he had. And then he referred to a book about transactions. Because it is, for me, the biggest form of tasawwuf is without any doubt holding on to the ahkam al-fiqhiyya. Because it is fiqh which will prevent you from harming others, and fiqh will prevent you from harming yourself, and fiqh will take you away from a gray zone to a clear-cut white zone. where everything is clear. We are not allowed in our lives to live in shak. And people keep on asking the same questions every year about basic things. Like, is this halal, is this haram? People have been asking for 20 years, 50 years, whether they can or cannot brush their teeth during the wudu, during Ramadan, right? Whether they can or they can't. People keep on asking whether using gel, yani putting gel on my hair, now invalidates my wudu, or if there is gel on my hair, can I make wudu over it? I mean, these are basic things, but people keep on struggling with them. So what we need to do is we need to learn fiqh. Fiqh is the first thing which one needs to be 100% sure of, apart from aqeedah, of course. Why? Because you're always doing something which requires fiqh from you. Is that clear? So this is the first thing I wanted to mention. So we study fiqh because 1, we want to stay away from haram. 2, we want to stay away from doubts. And the only ones that can take you away from doubts are the fuqaha. This when the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ الْحَلَالَ بَيِّنٌ وَإِنَّ الْحَرَامَ بَيِّنٌ وَبَيْنَهُمَا أُمُورٌ مُشْتَبِهَاتٌ لَا يَعْرِفُهُنَّ لَا يَعْلَمُهُنَّ كَثِيرٌ مِنَ النَّاسِ. Yani halal is clear cut, haram is clear cut. Within them there is doubt, and it is not, the answer to that doubt is not known by the majority of the people, because the majority of people are not fuqaha. Meaning, taking away from this hadith, it is known by people. The haqq, according to Ahl Sunnah, is always known, at least by one person, one alim, one faqih, or when it's ma'loom in ad-din bil-darura, yani by the majority of the Muslimin. So we need fiqh to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Transactions, even though that we don't put them in the same, under the same namer as ibadat, but nevertheless a correct transaction is ibadah. A correct transaction is ibadah. And so this in brief. We spoke about the faqih al-mu'tabar on Sunday, last Saturday, so I'm going to mention this again. What we also need to know about barakallahu feekum is fiqh has always been taught through a madhab. Now, so people creating their own fiqh, their own opinions, if you ask them what is your framework that you work in, what is your tartib of your adillah, how do you structure your proofs, then they won't have an answer. They just go, they read, what?
No, they say Quran and Sunnah.
They say Quran and Sunnah. We all agree Quran and Sunnah, but Quran and Sunnah only have the meaning that you give to it. Don't forget this. Because when you read, you are going to give it an interpretation, being it very close to its meaning, further away from its meaning, but then at a certain point as well, you will be in need of gathering and collecting or gathering all the ahadith about one topic and all the ayat, and then say why you chose for this and not for that, which is impossible for the Muslim to do. So this is why, barakallahu feekum, it is very important that people study the fiqh through a madhab. And people saying that a madhab is not needed, well, then they need to show us how the people that they listen to, how the people whose fiqh they go by, now approach the Quran and the Sunnah. And then you will see that the absence of a framework and the absence of a methodology is always there. They can't tell you why here they gave preference to the qawl al-sahabi, yani to the words of a sahabi, and here they gave preference to hadith al-da'if. So why here, actually your conclusion should have been something else based on the methodology that you used when you approached that issue. So they don't have any usul, they don't have any qawa'id, but nevertheless they say they have fiqh. There is no fiqh without usul, there is no fiqh without qawa'id. And if people, when we say that the bab of ijtihad is closed, then it's about the ijtihad al-mutlaq, yani the ijtihad of you doing ijtihad not within a framework that the scholars have left for us. But as for new issues, there will always be ijtihad. There is ijtihad. And what is also very important, as I've said before, is that a lot of the examples that we were given in the books of fiqh, they are examples, they are not qawa'id. They are examples, they are not qawa'id. So this is just an introduction. Why? Because then we will understand fiqh much better. And one of the examples that we will see, like when they say in the books, that it's al-ijab al-qabul bil-taradi min al-tarafayn bi-sighat al-madi. And then we said sighat al-madi is not a qa'idah. Sighat al-madi is an example. And it's an example showing us that whenever two parties agree, it should be with al-jazm, الذي لا مجال للشك فيه. Yani that one cannot doubt that the transaction took place from both parties. So we now are going to look at fi'l al-madi as being the qaida. We are, as the principle, we are going to make transactions very often impossible. Now, because a lot of transactions and contracts are not built on what? On the sighatul madi. So we will see, by making a very big difference between the qaida and the method, now that we will be able to distinguish between it. And one of the examples, remember Asim, what we said is, do you need to open your, what is it called, water reservoir of your car, and then take a straw and take the water out to perform wudu because you're out of water. And then we said there is an example in our fiqh, if you have a well and there is no what, you don't have a what? The habl. You don't have the rope, you don't have the bucket, then you don't need to invent things or crawl into the well. We said, well, this is an example, this is not a qaida. So we shouldn't do taqdees of the amthila. Now we shouldn't do taqdees of the amthila. What we should do is understand the amthila to then do ijtihad on the qaida that our previous fuqaha used to get to that mithal, to get to this example. Is the difference clear? So this is why when we read texts, we want to investigate the qawa'id more than the examples. Because a lot of these examples, we can't do anything with it anymore, unless we would be back in the times where these examples would be what? Relevant. Not meaning that they are not important, but meaning that by overthinking them while being in an entire different situation, without trying to build on these on the qaida that these examples were built on, then we will remain in the past, and people will still have questions which we don't have an answer to. Okay, so that is very important. So when people said that the ijtihad is closed, it doesn't mean ijtihad for new masail within a framework and according to a methodology that our scholars have left behind. Okay, and this is where people with knowledge and fiqh should have courage. Because, and this is very important, what you need to know, barakallahu fikum, is like the evolution of the fatwa in the madhab was gradually. You didn't find like somebody saying something now and then 10 years later saying something entirely different. But when you are going to look at thousands of years later and compare it to something at the very beginning, there might be a difference. Why? Because it was gradually changing. You see this. But now the problem is when the technological revolution or the industrial revolution took place, all of a sudden there was a different landscape. Meaning that sometimes now fuqaha within the madhab need to give an answer to problems that don't even look like problems that exist, which existed before. Meaning that it seems that they're far away from the madhab, but they're still building on the qawa'id. But the evolution has not been there. Meaning that if we now just build only on the previous books, that we won't be able to find everything we need, if you understand what I mean, because the difference is too big. And this is why people because they want to remain in their safe comfort zone, they say, no, I don't want to look into these new things because it's too far away from our texts. No, it is far away from your text, but it's not far away from the principles on which your text was based. So, and this is why it is important to distinguish between qawa'id and amthila. Is the point that I'm trying to make clear? So, and this is why people think like, okay, that's far-fetched, that's far away, I can't do this, it's so far away from my text. While in reality, if these scholars would have been alive today, they might have given this verdict. And this might have been the very example that they would have given. Okay? So being a Hanafi or someone with a madhab is more about the qawa'id than about the amthila. Okay? So let's continue. So then we said that we will speak about the mu'amalat. Okay, so the ijtihad al-mutlaq, that door is closed. Meaning, nobody now, ever, this is a consensus amongst the ulama, nobody can come and create a new framework or new principles or qawa'id that will be used to build a new fiqh on. The principles, the qawa'id, the fundamentals are there. And that is done. And nobody who ever came after the four has ever left a structure behind which you can use to build your qawa'id on. But the difference of the Hanafi fiqh, that the qawa'id were derived from what Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah azza wa jal would share with his students. And when we say students, we mean ulama, right? The students of Abu Hanifa were not people like myself, that were ulama, that were qudad, that were muftis, that were muhaddithin. So they looked at his madhab and then they looked for these qawa'id and these usul. And in other madhab, like you have Imam Shafi'i, yani clarifying what his usul are and what the manhaj is. So, and this is typical for the Hanafi madhab, and it's also this ruh that we find within the Hanafi madhab, allowing us today also to approach new things and new matters, yani what in a certain fashion or in a certain way. Like even the Sahiban, when Abu Hanifa, as you know, I'm not saying new things, yani, that they differed with him. They say it's not a difference of what? It's a difference of time, the time that we live in, not a difference of hearts and so forth. So we can differ, not we will differ with Abu Hanifa, that's what I'm trying to say. But anyway, so today, one of the most difficult sciences is mu'amalat. The reason why it's one of the most difficult sciences is because we are facing things that didn't exist before. Now we have these global forms of economics. I mean, the economic landscape is interlinked. Like, if you do something here, it has an effect over there. Also, the kind of money that we are using, which hasn't got a value on its own. No? There's no intrinsic value. It's just connected to something which has a value. Pushing people to say that you don't have to pay zakat on your paper money, right? Because it has a value, which is not true, of course. You need to pay zakat on that. But we have a lot of what? A lot of things going on. So how are we going to look at it? One of the principles we need to know is a name, giving a name to a certain transaction doesn't define what a transaction is. Is that clear? So when we are going to look here, the name of something doesn't reflect what this something is anymore. And this is one of the tricks of shaitan. Because when he spoke to Adam alayhi salam, then he said, your Lord is only forbidding you to eat from this tree إِلَّا أَن تَكُونَ مَلَكَيْنِ أَوْ تَكُونَ مِنَ الْخَالِدِينَ. Because otherwise you will turn into angels or you will live forever. يعني شجرة الخلد, يعني the tree of eternity. So he was actually, the hurma, or meaning the tree being haram to be approached, was still a fact. But by changing the name, he made it appear that the reality of this thing changed. And this is why alcohol, for example, in Islamic countries, they call it a sharab al-ruhi, a spirit, spiritual drink, because it brings you to higher levels. You know, you see? So changing the name today is something which happens a lot. So maybe the ta'amul, maybe the contract is actually a contract which is built on riba, but they will give it another name. So we are going to look at the reality, not at the name. Is that clear? So it's the realities which define what it's about. So it's not sufficient somebody saying, yeah, but there's no riba. Okay, show me. Riba is a reality, it's not a name, if you understand what I mean. Riba is a name, and then when I see it's riba, I must know it's riba, even if they say it's not. Okay? So we need to look at, in these times, we need to know what it is all about. Like hire leasing, or leasing and hiring, and you rent a car, it is not yours, or you lease a car, and then every 3 years you can change your car. So is this allowed or not? What is going on? Is there riba in that? Yes or no? You see? So all of these things we need to look at, and some of them are new, some of them already existed. Like insurance and these kind of things, and they existed up to a certain level. They were even discussing, this is just an introduction, right? Like when a camel comes from a higher point and runs into a camel which is walking, like not on a hill, and this camel runs into that camel and damages something. Who should pay what? Then they look into, was the camel overburdened? So meaning that the camel had found it more difficult to stop. So then, you know, it's all of this. Was this person raising his voice, like singing when he was, riding or pulling his camel? So they would look into all these details. So, and today, assurance does exactly the same thing. They look into all the details because they want to be sure that they don't pay you when they don't have to pay you. No. Okay, you wanted to ask something?
Oh yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned about spirits. In the Western world, they've started calling alcohol spirits.
Yes, exactly. Yes,
Similar
yes,
to
yes.
the
Yes, spirits, like whiskey and these kind of things, they call it spirits. Okay, yes.
Great. Going back to what you said about following principles, example, the Fuqaha said
Yes.
beforehand. What if we have a scenario that you're, for example, okay, you're Hanafi, yeah, and you're
Yes.
following the Hanafi mother.
Yes.
And then out of the 4 imams, you've chosen one and you follow that.
Yes.
Because even though the other imams, they had different opinions, but you
Yes.
followed one. Coming to the modern day, you come to a new situation, modern situation, which wasn't present at that time.
Yes.
So then you will obviously go to the scholars and see what they have ruled for that particular situation.
No.
If you come to a situation where even the Hanafi scholars now differ on that particular ijtihad they've done or whatever ruling they've done, what do you do then? Because then they're both Hanafi, but they both differ on it. So how do you then choose, or is it okay to choose any?
Let us talk about that later if you like, inshallah.
Yeah,
Yes, because what it is, we Muslims, just Muslims who are not scholars, they go to the faqih or to the mufti, who's known to be a mufti, because scholars who are at a level declare him to be a mufti, which is important. We are not going to call somebody mufti, or even somebody alim, if the scholars don't call him an alim or a mufti. Because it is not the people who define who a scholar is. It's not the people who define who can give fatwa. It are scholars who can do that. So that's part number one. So you are going to ask a mufti whom you know who is a mufti, because the muftis and the scholars said that he is reliable. You're going to ask him, and then you're not going cherry picking. The moment you know that the mufti is someone you can build on, who gives a fatwa according to traditional knowledge within this modern framework, khalas, then you just go by it. Because on what basis will you then choose? Just because it's better for you, that's not an argument. Because being better is very, very, very often built on hawa, on your personal desires. So when you say that I'm choosing for this, then you need to understand why, and the why is not because it feels better. The why, the only one who can say I'm going to choose between this or that, is when people differ within the madhab. For example, for a certain reason, our previous scholars, like until the 5th century, or 400 and so forth, they would do tarjih bayn al-aqwal and isnam. But who am I to do this?
What they would do?
They would look at the different opinions, and then they would say this is the most correct opinion, and that then eventually might have become that which the method goes by. But who are we to then make a choice based on what? Do you understand what I mean? Like, if people have two answers, what will be decisive for them? It's better for my pocket? It's better for my money? Well, being better for you doesn't mean that it's more halal. You understand? So when you ask a question to someone who's reliable, who is strong, who is defined by the scholars as being a scholar, you take it. And if you think that you're going cherry picking, then just start from the very beginning, not asking anybody. If you understand what I mean. Yes. Okay. Allah, let us continue. So, we are going to have a look, inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at the mu'amalat, and we are going we're based on the Mukhtasar of Imam Al-Quduri.